Hi there. Welcome to the Right Here, Right Now live show. This show has one simple question. What's on your heart and mind right here, right now in this moment? We explore the depths and breadths of our humanity through that one simple question over the course of 30 to 45 minutes. I hope that you'll join us. I hope you'll enjoy the exploration. And this tune was created for me personally by the incredible Peter Griffiths, one half of the amazing Mind Takeaway. Do let us know what you think. Let us know what you take away. And of course, we always welcome challenges too. Hope to see you on the exploration. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Gary Turner here, the host of the Right Here, Right Now live show. And I'm pretty damn excited to have the Mr. David Marquet in my orbit again. How are you, sir? Thanks for coming onto the show.
Oh, good, Gary. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, it's really good to see you again. We're having a little bit of a chat before we went live around, since we first spoke a couple of years ago. My God, the shifts. But hey, before we get going today, feel free to introduce yourself to anyone that's live or watching this back, David. Just give a bit more of an insight as to who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, I describe myself as a partly reformed control freak. I was a nuclear submarine commander. So as you might imagine, wanting to be in control, take control, have everything within my control, be able to predict everything that's going to happen was kind of deeply wired in my DNA. And I had a really exciting experience when the Navy put me at the very last minute on a submarine that I wasn't trained for, and I had to adapt to that. It was an amazing story and turned the ship around. And I since became really zealously believing in the power of language to change people's lives, and that a lot of what we do in leadership and a lot of what we do in consulting is kind of off. It starts at the wrong end because we kind of imagine that if we create a burning platform and convince people that they need to do something different, that they'll do something different. But generally, that's not the problem. I mean, convincing people that they shouldn't smoke, shouldn't drink as much, shouldn't eat as much, should work out more. That's not the problem, at least for me. Fortunately, I never picked up smoking, but it's not the desire that's the problem. So anyway, we kind of approach it from a different approach. We always say is we act our way to new thinking.
Awesome. What an awesome introduction. Well, thanks again for joining me. It's just brilliant. I just love this whole, even compared to 2 years ago when we first spoke, David, it's just that clarity, that succinctness of, I used to be a control freak. Now I realize there's a better way. Let's do it that way. Brilliant. But there's the one question, as you know from today, there's no scripting, there's no pre-planned set of questions. But I'm really curious today, we're on the 10th of January, 2022. What's on your heart and mind right here, right now, in this particular moment, David?
I've been thinking a lot about humans and their relationship to work. And there's a lot of things that are kind of sparking it. One is we were grounded, our movement, intent-based leadership, is grounded in this idea that we need to treat people fairly, and that we've inherited this industrial age structure where we divide humanity into the doers and the tellers. And like I happen to be since I went to college, I was in the deciding and the telling class, and it's not helpful. And humans don't like to be in the doing class or the I be told what to do class. Mm-hmm. Then we have COVID. It's proven that when you have stress, chronic stress, which is caused by many things, but including being told to do things where you're not in control of a lot of the inputs, but you have to meet certain deadlines. These are some of the most stressful jobs in the world. And so it takes a toll on our health. So we're trading away our health, which you're never going to get back. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe from part of it is because I'm getting older, and as we all are, but I'm my 60s now, and you realize that those trade-offs that you made when you were younger maybe weren't so great. And I think it's really reflected now. We see in the U.S., there's sort of this term, the Great Resignation. Huge amounts of people are just departing. Millions of people are departing the labor force. They're just saying the equation of what I'm doing for what I'm getting paid for isn't worth it. And I think a lot of those people are doing something different. They're doing something on their own terms, or they're just decided that they have enough money and they more important to live their lives. And I think probably also the mortality that we've seen from COVID is affecting it. It certainly affected me and helped me cherish the moments that I have here more. Unfortunately, from my wife, I'm kind of addicted to working, but I am trying to be better about not working. And it might seem hard, but it might seem easy, but it seems hard for me. I don't know why, what my problem is.
Right Here, Right Now show has turned into a therapy show. No, joking.
Yeah, well, hey, sorry about that.
No, it's but you know what I love though? It is that vulnerability, right? And that's part of the book that you wrote. The second book in Leadership is Language. There was a really noticeable shift for me. Is already a shift towards that more human element, how you led through, turn the ship around. But there was this depth of sort of connection and vulnerability I felt that came through Leadership is Language. And so, we shouldn't be afraid, for me, we shouldn't be afraid to talk about feelings, to talk about connection, to talk about vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because as you say, the last 12, 18 months have proven that without that, there's not a lot left, right? If we're not connected and we're not sensing each other.
Connection is super important for human beings. And in the industrial age, we actually didn't want to know our people. Knowing who your people were as human beings, the kids, their dreams, what they wanted to accomplish in their life, where they wanted to go on vacation, made it harder for you to order them around. So we had rules in the workplace, anti-fraternization rules. Now, the ostensible reason was because, we don't want someone to be unduly influenced by a relationship they have with someone, which is laudable. You want that. But the undercurrent was, and you don't really, because you're going to order these people around, you don't really need to know them that much. And because they're just doing what they're told, we might say we care about their emotional health, but we really don't. They show up, we beat on them. Adding stress was the go-to. Adding stress is what we taught people to do as leaders. It's whatever the problem is, add stress. How? In the form of, we don't say that, of course. We say, I motivate them. Hey, guys, we're burning daylight. Hey, we need to get this done. Hey, what's that? I'm just adding stress. I'm adding stress. I'm not making it safe. So,
wow.
We've been programmed to add stress, and we've been programmed not to really get to know the people who we work with, and that there's some separation of church and state between work life and life. It doesn't work, and I hope that this we can learn something through this COVID experience.
I've never heard it. Oh my God, it really hit me as you said that. We've been taught to add stress. Does that not seem it's madness when you think about it in that really simple statement, David?
Well, in the world, okay, so imagine you're running a textile mill or an automobile plant in the early 1900s. The workers were largely uneducated. They not unintelligent, uneducated. Mm-hmm. Maybe only a quarter of them could read. And you didn't need them to make decisions. In other words, they were hired for their hands. That's why we have the phrase all hands. We have all hands meetings in tech companies. Because people are hired for their hands. That's your value. It's the manual labor that you do as a human being. Well, humans are really actually pretty crappy at that. Computers are good at it. We lose focus. We have dexterity problems. Just putting someone in a place where they would do the same repetitive motion for 8 hours, it's tough, hard work. Fortunately, the computers and the robots and the algorithms are taking over that, and we can get more humans in the thinking space. But we still have this idea that, some people make decisions and other people do what those people who made the decisions decide. And in that model, if I don't need you to think, I don't need you to make decisions. All decisions are emotional. I don't care about your emotional health. I don't care that you're stressed out, because it doesn't really have a negative impact on your physical work. It does have a huge negative impact on creative work, which is, I would submit, all work. For humans to be treated respectfully, it's got to be creative. It's got to be interesting. It's got to be fun. It's got to be problem solving. Mm-hmm. So when I add, so this thing that we've all been taught as leaders, which is fundamentally about adding stress, impairs our prefrontal cortices, reduces our cognitive ability, and then we say, "Oh, I need you to get this done really fast and come up with some really good ideas." Well, that's impossible, because the stress you put on me made my brain shut down. So we've got mismatched. It's not evil. We're not evil, but it's a habit. I call it programming. And I'll give you some very simple examples. I hear a lot of people say, right? So does that make sense? So yeah, COVID's making everything blah, 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 right? So we're living in a VUCA world, right? So supply chain's having problems, right? Well, that adds a little stress. That adds stress, because now I have to agree. The implication is agree, right? And these are micro stressors. Another one is the binary question in my mind is a stress. It's a stressor for me. Someone says, I fall down. Someone says, are you okay? Well, I'm alive. Don't seem to have any broken bones, but I did scratch myself. Does that qualify for being okay or not okay? Where's the threshold for not okay? Versus, how are you? How are you feeling? Where does it hurt? Non-binary questions. But we're not programmed to say. I was on a flight, lady stood up, fell down middle of the night. She just stood up too fast, and flight attendants came over, turned the lights on. She was basically embarrassed. Are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. And she sat down next to me because there was an empty seat. So, how are you doing? I felt a little lightheaded. She's opening up to me. Why? Because I'm a better human? No, because I asked a different question. I didn't say, are you okay? I said, how are you doing? Start the question with the word how. We're not programmed like that. Over and over and over again, I catch myself asking binary questions. Are you sure? Is that going to work? So the self-therapy continues.
Yeah. It's so important though, right? Because that supply chain piece, by the way, David, is pretty pertinent to me. So I work in the global chemical supply chain, and it is. You talk about stress. Oh my goodness, we see the stress 3 months before the rest of the world does on the supermarket shelf. Yeah, and it is painful right now. It's really, really painful, and I'm really curious around all of this, because there's something. We've got a pandemic, but there's something endemic, right, about this. We know that this old way of leading doesn't work. You've written about it, you teach about it, you support companies about it, but it's still a really addictive default position for some weird reason that I observe, certainly in more traditional sectors. And I'm just really wondering, in your opinion, what's it going to take? What's the experience that some of these leaders that maybe are still stuck in the old industrial age, what do they need to experience for themselves to sort of open up that sort of genie of there is potentially another way? Is there anything that you've sort of come across? What are some of those experiences that people have had to go through to suddenly go, okay, there is another way, or a better way for me to lead?
Well, for me, I had to give a bad order on a nuclear submarine. I had to give an order that didn't make sense on a nuclear submarine and have the officer order it. I didn't give the order. I suggested, hey, why don't we do this? And the officer ordered it. was basically second gear on a car that only had one gear. And the fact that I had made a mistake wasn't so shocking. I wasn't trained for that particular ship, but the fact that the officer, knowing that it was wrong, ordered it anyway was shocking and really made me rethink everything, because all my leadership, because I was one of the anointed deciders and I was promoted on the strength of the decisions that I made, was not the best way. I always thought, oh, I'm doing my part. I'm telling the team to speak up. I'm telling them that they should speak up if I'm wrong. I'm telling them that I really am interested in their ideas. All earnest and true things that were absolutely true and that I hear other leaders say. But I go to the board meeting, I say, so the 737 MAX is ready to go and we got FAA approval. So anyone see any problems with that? And I earnestly, if you gave me a test, say, yeah, I really want to know what people think. But the way I set the whole thing up was, what person in their right mind is going to tell the CEO, no, I think that's a problem. So we suppress all that. What you need to do is be quiet first and create the team. You want to lean back. Leaning in is the wrong thing to do. Leaning into your team. You want to lean back, in my opinion, because leaning back creates a space for them to lean into. You want to lean into your body. You want to lean up, not down. But it's so much easier. It's so much easier to control, or you can't control it, but we think we can. So we substitute. We have a hard problem. How do I control myself and my language so that it brings out the best in other people? Well, that's really a hard problem. So I substitute what I think is an easier problem, which I'm just going to order them to speak up, rather than I'm going to structure the meeting in a way which inherently makes it feel safer and easier for people to speak up. Most meetings, no one knows what that looks like. Most people have never been in a meeting like that. 99.9% of you have been in a meeting where every time there's a decision to be made, we talk about it and then we vote on it. That structure is inherently designed to suppress dissenting opinions, because the discussion, which happens serially, is overly weighted and anchored to the first person who speaks, and the way the group thinks, and the way the boss thinks. And it deliberately suppresses. I say deliberately because it's a choice you make. You don't need to run the meeting that way. We just all do. We don't even think about it. We're just mindless. It's so frustrating to me. I do these exercises with teams and I give them a question. They think it's all about answering the question, but it's really about how do they come up with the answer. And then I say, well, why'd you run the meeting that way? Huh? What? I don't know. And I've already talked about, we got to really think about our words. We need to be deliberate about our words. But I sympathize because I have the same problem. I default back to the words I was programmed to say.
It's so interesting. So one of the things I did earlier last year, David, actually was I held an event, an in-person event, finally 3 years after after the first attempt.
Well done.
With all the COVID stuff. But we intentionally, and this is really interesting, right? We thought we'd come into this space, lovely country house in the southwest of the UK. We didn't have an agenda. We were going to co-create the agenda from all of the participants that turned up. David, the experience was exponentially more rich, deep, exploratory than I believed it would be. Through the idea, 13 human beings came together and just co-created the agenda. Who wants to take a lead? Who wants to go for a walk with one or two other people? And it just took off its own life over these 2 days. And I think we can do that for 30-minute meetings if we just create the space.
Yeah, I had an amazing experience. Those are called, there's a word for like open... Sort of
open spacey type is the sort
space,
of thing. Yeah, it's that sort of approach. Yeah.
When my book first came out, I got this email from Denmark, of all places. This was like a month and a half. I'd sold 4 copies, and I think my mom bought 3 of them. But from Ole Jepsen, who's now a great friend, and Ole and Jenny. But he sent me a long note on Facebook and about coming to. And I was like, sure, I don't, Denmark come for a meeting. And they had this meeting, and like I thought I understood control, but there's a giving up control. But this was a new level. But here's the deal. And I want to make this point. It's not unstructured. We need, so we don't just say, at least my experience was, and it's the structure. Hey, we're going to have 45-minute time block. We're going to have 3 a.m. We're going to have an hour, 15 minutes for lunch. Then we're going to have 3:45. And they're going to here, and these are the rooms, and you can sign up for what you want to talk about and go to. That's the structure that allows that kind of thing to happen. Now I can release control of what are we going to talk about? We're going to make a new app. We're going to brainstorm on future trends, whatever it happens to be. But it happens within a structure. If I just took 13 people or 30 people or 150 people and said, go in a room, just do something, come up with some cool ideas, it would be a disaster. Mm-hmm. And so this is exactly what happened on the submarine. Was I controlled the structure of the way meetings were. I controlled the structure of the language. For example, I said we were going to use the word we, not they, to refer to anyone within inside the submarine. So we had a lot of days. We had 150 people. We had days by rank. We had days by department. And I see this in every company. Same thing. Same 2 basic dimensions: departments and rank. It quickly becomes a they, and so you had to use the word we. And 6 months later, we felt like we, but initially it didn't feel like we. And people visiting the submarines got this weird sense. Oh, this feels like an amazing culture of teamwork. And I never talked about a culture of teamwork. I just said, we're going to have a protocol. We're going to refer to each other using the word we. We sends a signal to your brain. This person's in my tribe. I can trust them. They sends a signal to your brain. This person is not in my tribe. I can't trust them. People in my tribe, I assume good intent and I collaborate with. The people not in my tribe, I assume questionable intent and I compete with. And don't give your people a lecture about being collaborative and assuming good intent. Just say the word we when you refer to different parts of the organization.
It's so interesting. You really reminded me, one of them, and it really links back to that experience I just shared from earlier last year. And it actually rung bells. I shared actually our first podcast conversation from episode 7 of Value Through Vulnerability 2 years ago, because I remember so clearly how you gave that example of that social experiment where I think it was a kindergarten school or a school basically, where they got rid of the fence,
right?
And everybody congregated in the center, if I remember correctly.
The boundaries make it safe. Yeah, we. It was some either a study or an anecdote, but when you have a fence, you put a fence around the playground, the kids can play right up to the fence because they know that's safe. Inside the fence is safe. When you take the fence down, we say, well, fences create boundaries and they hem people in. Yeah, but they define what's safe versus not safe. And so I work with a private equity group in London, and they're one of the co-founders uses a phrase about guardrails, which is something like wide enough to succeed and high enough, or wide enough so wide enough that you can basically do as much as possible, but high enough that you feel safe inside that space, which is I didn't articulate it well, but basically exactly, I think, right. It's clear boundaries. And so when I go to organizations and I ask them, well, who owns this decision? Well, blah, 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 blah. And I say, no, I don't know. And they look at me like I'm asking an obvious question, but then they can't answer it. So those are problems, I think. In the Navy, I really grew to appreciate our clarity of ownership. I could walk around the submarine. I think about it 2 ways. One is in terms of the physical equipment. I could touch anything and I knew who owned it. And I could think about any process. And I could identify who owned it. Every once in a while, there was something that was not clearly. When there was a problem, I would always look at, okay, who's the owner? What's the process? And typically there was a gap in one or the other. But I was able to leverage that clear ownership, because if you don't have clear ownership, all we did was take everyone who used to come to me and say, here's all it is. I'll demystify the whole thing. Instead of coming to your boss and saying, I'd like permission to do ABC, they just came and said, here's what I intend to do, ABC. That was it. It just shifted everything.
It's absolutely amazing. I just want to share a couple of comments. Rich joined us, said, your we discussion is very enlightening, building trust through tribes. Thanks for joining us, Rich. And also Harry, the royal we. Indeed.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how royal we were, but yeah, we were definitely a we.
And by the way, if anyone's joining us, feel free. If you've got a question for David, I've got for about another sort of 7 to 8 minutes. Feel free to post something if you'd like to ask David a direct question. I'd love to put that to him as well.
Yeah, this week. Sorry, Gary.
Please.
Yeah, no, I'm just liquored up on the we. I love when I go to companies and I walk around, they'll give me a tour, and I ask them, tell me about these people. Tell me about the well, we're over here in product design. Well, they are marketing, and that's the team boundary right there. And I have bizarre experiences. I'm at I go to see a specialist doctor, and I'm talking to the person checking me in, and she's saying, I'm asking her a question about one of they want you to like, well, who's they? Like, don't you work here? Isn't that part of you? Like, but her mindset is there's a they and a we inside work, which even is articulated externally. It's like, that's not a good workplace. You don't feel like you're part of the team. You just feel like you're a separate little sort of, pod out here who gets told what to do. Like, we're going to outsource. We saw this with a client there at big tech companies in the US where they had offices in Bangalore and Chennai. We go over there, and there's a big we they there. Who's they? Oh, well, so the guys in Silicon Valley. And we go to Silicon Valley, who's they? Oh, those knuckleheads out of Mumbai. If they would just do what we told them to do, it'd be a lot easier for everybody. Bangalore, that's where we were. Anyway, they.
So tell us, like, I'm really intrigued. We sort of started with that one question. Like, you're really thinking deeply about this stuff, as I know you always do. Is there something coming up on the horizon? Is there anything that you envision? Is there any shifts coming that maybe, like, even you would be surprised about if you look at the sort of David of 2-3 years ago? Is there anything popping up or popping out that you think's going to be quite transformational in the next couple of years that maybe
for
you did
me
not foresee?
Personally, or
for you personally or work, wherever you want to go with that. But I'm just intrigued to give the listener and each other just a bit more of a, like, wow, okay, that I did not expect that to be coming, whether it be you personally or for your business.
Yeah, you have to eat your own dog food, and I'm in the midst of eating my own dog food right now. To me, there's things that I know, like logically. If you gave me a test, and like on the submarine, if you said, is it a really good idea for you to give orders when you don't know the technical details of the submarine? I could say, well, no. But then there's things but you don't know it in your heart and your gut. So one of the things, leadership is a journey toward irrelevance, because eventually you're going to die, or you're going to retire, or you're going to leave, or you're going to sell your company. And unless you want to, and then things will either fall apart if it all depends on you. So you don't start there, but you want to end there. So it's this continuous journey toward irrelevance, and you have to, every single day is an opportunity to make yourself more and more irrelevant, less and less relevant. And you do it by avoiding telling the team what to do, by you set structures up which allow the team to figure out on their own that they need to do something and what it is that they ought to do about it. So for me, I'm in my 60s now, and I made a commitment to my wife that I'm going to do less. So I am in the midst of turning basically the company over. Actually, this was last year, to the employees. We had our best year ever. Yeah.
Wow.
And I am doing less. So I don't know, maybe there's a correlation there. I'm doing less, a lot less in terms of running the company, and I'm even doing less in terms of speaking, certainly in terms of in-person speaking. We had a dozen or so last year, which is, we've had it over 100 sometimes. Well, in any event, so it's interesting because I'm dealing psychologically with giving control of my quote baby, and this thing that was really emotionally important to me. And knock wood, I mean, I hopefully I can be a good enough student of my own approach that I can step back and let them go on and flourish. So far, the signs are good.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. I just think that's just an incredibly brilliant example. So tell us, like, what's the, because, you speak about, gut, heart, what I see the last 2 years being is a massive accelerant of the connection of the two, right?
Yeah.
We know we've always needed to have both, but we've really suppressed the heart, the intuition part, because of all of the stuff you described earlier. What part of this journey for you right now in this moment is the most challenging as someone eating their own dog food? Which is the toughest bit for you? And what's the bit that you're learning most, or what's maybe most validating for you of your own work as you eat the dog food?
Basically, it's about aligning what I truly can control with what I strive to control. So I think this is it's a lifetime struggle. So on the one hand, I think, imagine a 2x2 matrix: things that I can control and things that I try to control, and things I can't. So something I can control and something that I work on controlling, say, for example, is my own eating. That's kind of an obvious one, or my own workout habits. Mm-hmm. Things that I can't control, but I try and control are things that happen out in the world, whether it's a COVID-related thing or just getting somebody else to do something. And at trying to control those things is just a stressor. And then things that I can control, but I don't kind of control, are maybe sometimes my own language or my own reactions or my own behaviors, because it's easier to kind of point the finger outward and say, hey, well, you guys need to speak up more, not, oh, I need to speak up less. But since you can control how much you speak, but not how much others speak, if you want to influence how others speak, you got to control how much you talk. One of the concepts that came out of leadership as language that we studied was a concept called share of voice, which is how even is the word count. All we did, I'm a math, physics, engineering kind of guy, so we look at language and leadership through this dimension. So we took transcripts of teams and situations where we had transcripts. A lot of these were from airplanes or ships with black boxes, or things like an oil well. Any place we had a transcript, and we would count the words that each person said and then match them to their rank. And there's a very clear pattern that the higher you are in the hierarchy, the more words you're allocated. Now, I say the word allocated because it's not as obvious as the person just talks a lot. The group actually expects them to fill more space. The group cedes to them more airtime. This is a fragile pattern because as a result of that, we were over biased towards one person's or a small group of people's voices, and we miss what the people who don't speak up, what they see and what they know and what they just think. One of my favorite questions is, what are you worried about that there's zero evidence to support? Or like, so in a work meeting, someone's coming up with work to do, starting to do a new project or something, say, hey, what might be bothering you about this? And there's no evidence at all support it. I think we're trying to turn humans into these robots where everything's fact-based and evidence-based, and that's great. Have a robot, have the computer run the spreadsheet, and it'll tell you what house to buy. Do people buy? Well, look, square footage, da, 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 da. Well, no, I don't really see myself living in that house. So there's something else beyond that that's emotional, and that we need to balance both things. I'm not about just like, well, I'm an expert, I have a feeling on how to run the nuclear power plant. No, you don't know anything. You didn't study it. You're an idiot when it comes to, so we're not going to listen to you there. But in an area where you do have domain knowledge, then we need to open up the door for this tap into the emotional. I'm not saying always do it, but let's at least be able to talk about it. Because if you can talk about that, then you can talk about a lot of other things, because it feels really unsafe to talk about, there's no evidence for this, but I'm really worried that, I don't know. Everyone thinks interest rates are going to go up, and maybe they are, but maybe something else will happen. I don't know. The dollar just keeps getting stronger. Maybe that's going to reverse, and the dollar's going to get weaker. I don't know. Maybe Brexit we all think it's going to have one impact. It's going to have something totally different. So that's the kind of thing. But it's a good vehicle, because if you can't talk about that, then there's going to be a lot of other things you can't talk about. So it's going to really make the quote meeting theater as opposed to real discussion.
Just say, as we look to wrap this all up, I'm just loving this sort of. If I was going to summarize it, David, it's almost just, and so many people in so many areas of life just want the same thing, right? How can we live as an integrated whole human being across every part of our life, right? And, the amazing thing is, we come from that. We're born that, right? And we got socialized away from it. This is the fascinating thing for me.
Yeah, and when I was growing up, I was an ardent fan of democracy and capitalism, and it's definitely a better system than I think anything else that's out there. But when you read like Marx and say, well, he's talking about the alienation of the worker, I can see that. Like, there's a big part of that. And I think partly because I went to a nice public school in a nice town outside of Boston, that I couldn't really identify with that, but now I'm much more sympathetic to that, those feelings. When my book came out and I got published in Chinese, I went to China a couple times, and I had one experience that stands above all the others. I was at lunchtime, I was meeting with a business fora with a bunch of expats who are basically running Chinese company, and they kind of patted me on the head and said, "Oh, this is very nice, but Chinese workers just want to be told what to do." Blah blah blah. I said, "Okay, fine, whatever." And then in the evening, I went to I was a speaker at an executive MBA program at at Tsinghua University, which is, they were all telling me, "Oh, this is the Harvard of Chinese universities." And I said, "Okay, fine." I didn't know, but so I'm sitting there. I'm this big auditorium, all these Chinese people, and me, one white dude. And I just had my slides up, and I just said, "You know what? Let's do something a little different." I said, I want to ask you guys a question. This is what I've been told. Number one, Chinese people just want to do what they're told. And I kind of like spat it out, like, Chinese people, like in a provocative way. And then I also said, and you guys are going to speak up. No one's going to ask a question. And if I ask you a question, no one's even going to respond. That's what I've been told. And I said, when I say go, talk to your neighbor about that for 1 minute, and then we're going to have a conversation. So I said, ready? And I'm looking at the interpreter. She's like, ready, go. And even before she said go, the whole room's erupted in conversation. Then we spent the next 2 hours. I didn't ever flick the slide. Over and over and over again. Like, that's all, it's bullshit. It's like, that's what you people say about, like, this is what we want. And I could have been in Kansas. I could have been in Liverpool. It's the same thing. I want a job that matters. I want to make life better for my family. Like, you don't think our grandparents wanted jobs that mattered? Yeah, of course they did. They wanted to feed the family first. So this whole thing about millennials being so much different, it's all nonsense. The environment that they're operating is indifferent. And if you took our generation, you threw us in that environment, I'm pretty sure we'd act the same way, because the DNA of the human race didn't change in one generation.
Do you know something? I want to keep you for another 2 hours now, but I know that your wife wouldn't be very happy on that note.
Yeah, I got to bail out.
I just want to capture though what you just shared was a brilliant example of enough structure. Yeah, exactly modeling what you just shared earlier in the conversation. Here's enough structure. Here's a question.
Yeah.
There's the frame. Go and explore it. And then you didn't even need your slides for the rest of that session. Just a great example of.
It's like your show.
Yes, it's just, but it's brilliant, right? It's true. Like, that was the structure in that moment. Intuitively, you thought that was the right thing to do, but it was enough structure to facilitate what happened next.
Fortunately, it was a gutsy thing. I normally wouldn't do that, but I was so jet lagged. I just didn't give a shit anymore. I was just like, I don't care what happens here, which sometimes results in really bad decisions, but sometimes really fun ones.
Well, I think that's for me. I think it's just a brilliant way to wrap up this brilliant exploration today.
Thanks.
Yeah, enough structure. Yeah. Create some freedom, create some space for people to step into. And
minimum viable structure. That's what you want.
Do you know what I'm taking as well? Minimum viable stress on top as well.
Yes,
would also be nice. David, appreciate you joining me again. Have a great day. And thanks everyone for joining us. Appreciate you.